We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we are talking the Panama Canal. We're talking Nicaragua. We're talking the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and how Donald Trump plans to deal with them all. It's going to be quite the show. And please remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We're very fortunate to have with us Liberty Nation's national security correspondent and all about fount of knowledge on things international and defense, Mr. Dave Patterson. Thanks for being here, Dave.
Hey, Mark, glad to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. And let's talk about this year, what's going to happen. I mean, that's, for me, this is why I really wanted you on the show today, is because there's so much about to come down and land on the world, and some of it's going to be good and some of it's going to be shocking, but all of it in the best possible spirit will hopefully be entertaining for you and I, who make our livings and soothe our souls with international happenings. So Dave, the first one I have to talk about is the situation with the Panama Canal. Now, coincidentally, I'm not referring to Ian Fleming of James Bond fame's coincidentally, it was first time happenstance, second time coincidence, third time enemy action. But we actually, coincidentally, both wrote articles on the Panama Canal and Trump's bid to gain some leverage of control over that. And amazingly, considering, let's be fair, they were both quite lengthy articles, slightly longer than the usual that we have on the page of LibertyNation.com. But we didn't do any crossover at all because there's so many angles to look at this. So, Dave, what's your first blush with Trump's talk about the Panama Canal?
Well, my first blush is that, Trump talks and his words have a lot of different meanings, and he intends them to. And the first blush is, oh my goodness, he's going to go down and take over the Panama Canal. But if you think about it, do you really want the Panama Canal? Do you really want to do this again? It'd be so much of America's treasure in getting this done. But if you want to convince the Panamanians to unload the Chinese at both ends of the canal, then maybe what you're saying will have some impact. So, you always have to look at what Donald Trump means and at not necessarily the specific words that he's using to convey meaning.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, I think it was towards the end of the Art of the Deal, where and I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember it exactly, or even close to exact, but it's when you're negotiating, ask for absolutely everything, even if you don't want it. And then, then when you back off, everybody think, oh, thank goodness he only wants this. And that's what you wanted in the first place.
That's right.
You mentioned the Chinese there. And I think this is something that so many people really just aren't taking into account. So the surface level analysis of the Panama Canal situation is that Donald Trump is saying to Panama that, he wants some control, some level of control over something that is now a Panamanian institution as such. But the reality is that, as you say, controlling both ends of the Panama Canal and all of the much of the adjacent land to either side of it, it's all Chinese businesses and Chinese operating companies. And so it's not as though this is Donald Trump making overtures to Panama. This is Donald Trump attempting, as far as I can tell, attempting to take some of the power that China has imposed upon the waterway away and make it a bit of a fairer deal for Americans. Is that, do I have that?
I think that's right. I think that Donald Trump would never have brought this subject up if the Panama Canal were run by a legitimate Panamanian enterprise, and that the tolls were consistent with other tolls across the world. And no, they're not. They're higher, and the United States does 72% of the business going through the Panama Canal, so it impacts the United States more than any other country in this. And so consequently, it has come up on Donald Trump's scope. And once you do that, you can anticipate that he will work through this until he gets something that looks like what he wants in the beginning.
I mean, there are many ways to approach it, and we'll go into a few of them, I think. But just to get some of the base level data down, as you say, it's 72% of all shipping through the waterway is something to do with the United States. So there's the levies being paid there. And so presumably that means that roughly 72%, obviously there'll be a difference in that there'll be large containers, small containers. But more than 2/3 of the shipping costs, the fees, the levies, are paid by the US. And at the same time, and I think that totals somewhere around, in 2021, it was about just under 3 billion. I'm not sure what that is now, but I'm presuming it's, again, around the 3 billion mark. And then, of course, the State Department notes that America provides Panama with about $3 billion a year anyway, just in taxpayer largesse for something. I'm not entirely sure what America gets out of that deal. But there's $6 billion that is being earmarked, taken by the Panamanians. And to ask for something in return for that doesn't seem overly unreasonable for a commander-in-chief whose primary purpose is, as stated, is America first.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, but remember, this is Donald Trump's theme. The United States, over the years, has become the laughingstock of the rest of the world. We pay for everything, and we get nothing in return. And we have been taken advantage of. But when I say taken advantage of, it's not because we're weak necessarily and they're strong. It's because we have had a State Department that has a philosophy that says, if we're real nice to you, will you be real nice to us? And that's a philosophy for disaster, because they're not going to be real nice to you. They don't care about you. They are interested in what's going on in their country. And they look at us and say, why aren't you thinking about your country? Why do you continually give up things in hopes that we'll be conciliatory, which we never have been?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? That there isn't necessarily a reason for these third-party countries to be conciliatory, because they look at the long example that's come out of the State Department. This is going back through various iterations of the State Department, through various leaderships in various parties. And how rare is it that, hey, we did this for you, and you bit the hand that's feeding you? Well, we're not going to continue to do things for you. That just doesn't happen in noticeable enough increments that people think there will be any repercussions for decrying the great Satan, as it were. And
the reason they think that is because there are no repercussions. There are no consequences.
because they're right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're exactly right. I mean, I say this only somewhat facetiously, but you have a State Department that has over the years become a group of people who are stabbing each other in the back while trying to achieve the Alger Hiss Chair of Fine Diplomacy. And you can't take these people seriously. Now, I do understand that there are pockets of intellectual honesty in the State Department. They're hard to find, but nonetheless, they're there. And I believe that you take a Secretary of State like Marco Rubio, he understands that what he's up against, I would hope, and will take the appropriate measures to ensure that if State Department, deep state actors want to behave contrary to what the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, wants to have happen, they will simply be marginalized. And that's how you deal with them. They don't come to your meetings. So if they don't come to your meetings, they don't know what's going on. And if they don't know what's going on, they can't be mischievous.
We're going to continue the conversation on marginalization, but on an international scale after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.